Kevin is a research scientist in FWC's Fish and Wildlife Research Institute, and he'll be talking today about successful translocation of the Florida scrub lizard in Palm Beach County.
Thanks, Carl. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Sorry there was no video of me talking. My monitor does not have a camera on it, but you're not missing much. I'd like to acknowledge my co-authors, RICARDO ZAMBRANO, NATASHA, WARRAICH, ANDREA, PEREYRA, and Matt FEDLER. All were once FWC staff, but NATASHA and ANDREA have since moved on to greener pastures. At least I assume they're greener. The Florida scrub lizard, Sceloporus woodi, is currently... Oops. It's not advancing. There we go. Florida scrub lizard Sceloporus woodi is currently unlisted, but has been proposed for federal listing. It would appear to be a good candidate for translocation because of its high fecundity. A large female produces an average of about 20 eggs annually. The lizard hatched early in the year may produce later that same year, and most individuals live for only 1 year. The population probably turns over every 2 years. A study found densities as high as 124 lizards per hectare after hatchling emergence, but survival rates were low and populations fluctuated. Florida scrub lizard once occurred in 4 disjunct areas. Blue symbols are prior to 1980. It evolved in Lake Wells Ridge and colonized other areas during lower sea levels when habitats were drier. The red arrows show how colonization occurred, and according to a mitochondrial DNA study, Atlantic coast populations are approximately 8% divergent from the ancestral population. When I conducted a status survey for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in 1986, I found 18 populations in Palm Beach County and 3 populations remaining in Broward County. And in Palm Beach County, the occupied sites, lizards were very common. I conducted a resurvey for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in 2018 using the same methodology as 32 years earlier, and found that the Atlantic coast range of the species had contracted 77 kilometers northward. The only 2 populations remaining in these 2 counties were in scrub preserves in northern Palm Beach County on opposite sides of US 1. The last southwestern Gulf Coast population apparently went extinct around 1995. Hypoluxo Scrub Natural Area is a scrub preserve owned by Palm Beach County. During my 1986 survey, I did not visit it because I was unaware of its existence. Back then, I was going by, taking big topo maps with me, and there was a lot of scrubs that weren't identified. It was kind of the dark ages. When I visited the site during my 2018 survey, I was quite impressed with the infrastructure. I was also impressed with the habitat, which looked great for scrub lizards. Scrub lizards need areas of bare sand in which to forage, bask, and socially interact. They also need clumps of shrubs, or sometimes trees, as shade and escape cover. The only thing that didn't look good for scrub lizards was the presence of the parasitic love vine, which is the orange or yellow colored vegetation in these photos. I was surprised that I did not see any scrub lizards and thought that it would be an ideal translocation site. Before considering it as a translocation site, I had to be sure that scrub lizards still didn't occur there, because I didn't want to affect resident populations. When I conducted an occupancy modeling study of scrub lizards in Atlantic coast sites, I found a high detection probability of 0.76. This means that if I unsuccessfully surveyed a site 3 times, the probability that the site was actually occupied was only 1%. To be on the safe side, I surveyed all Palm Beach County sites 46 times before concluding populations had been extirpated. The last time that land managers had seen scrub lizards in nearby scrubs was around 2005, and they had never seen them at Hypoluxo. So technically, this is not a reintroduction, but in all likelihood, it is a reintroduction. We just never detected them there in recent times. Obviously, before introducing scrub lizards, it would be good to know why they disappeared in the first place and make sure that possible causes of extirpation are no longer operating. A possible cause was cumulative mortality from feral cat predation, because this is in a really quite dense neighborhood. In 2004 to 2005, 12 cats were trapped there, and land managers said they no longer seemed to be a problem. Love vine could have restricted the mobility of scrub lizards when it encroached on bare sand adjacent to scrubs, but love vine coverage was not as high as in many scrubs in the area. The lack of fire probably is responsible for proliferation of love vine in all scrubs in that part of the state. The non-native brown anole and northern curly-tailed lizards could be competing with scrub lizards or eating smaller lizards. Both these species are present at Hypoluxo. The curly-tailed lizard is the largest species and probably poses the greatest threat. After being released on the island of Palm Beach in the 1940s, curly-tails expanded their range and were continuously distributed along the Atlantic coast in Palm Beach and northern Broward counties by 2002. The area was impacted by 2 destructive hurricanes in 2004, but before and after aerial images look similar, and other populations have survived many hurricanes during their existence. So I don't think this was really an issue. Probably the most likely explanation for the lack of scrub lizards is extirpation by past land use practices. According to the management plan for the area, most of the area was cleared by 1964 and has been mowed for at least 4 years since then. So why did I consider it as a possible translocation site? Palm Beach and Broward counties have lost over 95% of their scrub habitat due to development, reducing herpetofaunal diversity. If this translocation were successful, the species range will be extended 37 kilometers south of the nearest extant population at Jupiter Ridge Natural Area. The donor sites, Jonathan Dixon and Sea Branch Preserve State Parks, over 50 kilometers away, but represent sites with robust populations that should not be impacted by lizard removal. For example, I once saw 37 lizards in 10 minutes at Sea Branch Preserve State Park. Before obtaining a permit from the Florida Park Service, I had to provide a convincing argument that their populations could sustain the level of removal I proposed. Hypoluxo scrub contains 7.5 hectares of prime scrub lizard habitat and 24 hectares of suitable habitat, which is plenty of habitat for long-term population persistence. Another study showed that populations did well in habitat patches 2 to 6 hectares in size. I found a population along the Atlantic coast that had persisted 30 years in a 1.4 hectare habitat patch. Another study showed that scrub lizards seldom disperse more than 200 meters to a new site when the habitat becomes unsuitable. We assembled a crew of lizard catchers, several of whom were volunteers. In late February 2019, we made a couple trips to these 2 parks and captured 48 male and 54 female scrub lizards by hand. We removed them from 2 separate areas in each park, which are the areas delineated in red, to minimize impacts to the donor populations. We measured each lizard and collected a genetic sample by removing the smallest toe on a front foot. We released pairs of lizards the same day they were captured to minimize stress. We released them in the 7.5 hectares of best habitat delineated in red. Dispersal into adjacent good scrub habitat is possible along the yellow arrows. Blue X's indicate scrubby flatwoods, which is suboptimal habitat for scrub lizards, although they might use trails in it. We needed to monitor the success of this translocation effort. If declining population trends were observed, we would need to make a decision as to whether population augmentation was warranted. FWC staff in our West Palm Beach office conducted meander surveys during the first year and bi-monthly survey shortly after release. And the highest number was 31 adults and 23 juveniles during the September 2019 survey. Fortunately, the species is relatively easy to observe because it hangs out on areas of bare sand, but we don't know what % of the population was detected during surveys. Before the study began, I decided that if a population persisted 2 years after the release, the project could be considered a success. We could stop regularly monitoring. All individuals present likely would have been born on site. During a survey 2 years after release, we found that lizards had dispersed at least 350 meters south of their release site. We collected 11 genetic samples in case there's an interest in the future on looking at genetic relatedness to determine how many of the founder animals contributed to the present population. Palm Beach County Department of Environmental Resources Management staff enthusiastically supported this translocation. Although the management plan calls for prescribed fire, this has not occurred, and the management indicated this is unlikely to happen because of nearby residences and smoke issues. However, I was encouraged that aerial photos showed that the amount of bear sand has remained relatively unchanged for at least 30 years, suggesting that the habitat will remain suitable for scrub lizards in the future. In the absence of fire or mechanical treatment of scrub vegetation, other sites have become overgrown and areas of bear sand greatly diminished in Palm Beach County. During one day in February 2020, Palm Beach County staff and volunteers hand-pulled 195 kilograms of love vine from one area of the property. So that will benefit lizards, and they plan on doing additional removals in the future. I created a flyer to post in kiosks to alert visitors to our reintroduction program, and I provided my contact information. As a result, I've received photos of scrub lizards from Hypoluxo. In addition, the scrub lizard is now highlighted in wildlife posters in the kiosks. There's a local newspaper article on the translocation, and FWC created a YouTube video that reached 245,000 people. Now that we know scrub lizards can be successfully translocated and have survived for over 3 years, what's the next step? Well, the southwestern Gulf Coast population is apparently extinct. When I visited Marco Island in 1986, the last patch of scrub had been recently cleared, but a few scrub lizards were still present during my first survey, and when I went back there a few months later, they're all gone. The last site with lizards in North Naples has been developed. During my 2018 survey, I found that county-owned railhead scrub in Naples had the best-looking scrub lizard habitat. I also happened to find a pot growing operation in Rosemary Bulb there. Like Hypoluxo scrub, there are no records of the species from railhead scrub, but populations once occurred nearby. The Gulf Coast population was genetically distinct, a lighter color than elsewhere, so we have already lost something unique that can never be recreated. However, we could reintroduce the species to at least one scrub ecosystem using animals from the most closely related population on the southern end of the Lake Wales Ridge. Archibald Biological Station has robust populations and is a potential donor site. I have not pursued such a translocation attempt. We'll welcome your input on whether this is even worth doing. Here are the people and agencies who helped make this happen. This was a collaborative effort and didn't cost anything except some gas money and people's time, and some of them didn't even get paid for it. I will now take questions.
Thank you, Kevin. That was very interesting. And before we get to questions, I have to ask you, who caught the most lizards at the donor site?
I think it was between me and Matt FEDLER. We went out there and I made all these nooses and out of bamboo pole and these nooses with fish line. And it was such a windy day that the nooses were totally worthless. So we were all like just running around and and actually diving on lizards under bushes and things. And so I wasn't quite as agile as I was 32 years ago. But I did catch my share and they killing me, at least by landing on them.